Chapter 19. A Farewell.
I'll hold them off. Get far away from here,
the beast said through parted jaws. 2 arrows were lodged in her flesh, and a wound at her throat dripped crimson droplets onto the ground. The wound at her side from my dagger was healing. Her fur pelt around it, though, was soaked in blood. She bowed her head, and I thought she was going to collapse for a moment. But instead, she grabbed my long coat in her jaws and offered it to me. Reluctantly, I took it, wondering why right then and there she seemed almost human to me. Her eyes never left mine, blazing emerald with dark abysses for pupils. In her eyes, there was a strange sadness. And then I realized, with surprise, that she didn't want to fight.
May Varrock smile upon you, and may his light mark your path. With his light your sword will never falter, and your shield will never fail,
she said, and then turned away from me. I could hear the cavalry coming, and knew that this place was not safe. Yet for a moment, I hesitated, confused. I had just knowingly given her to those who planned to kill her. Why was she trying to protect me, even after she had seen me kill? Part of me was screaming to grab my broadsword from my back and turn to fight. I had promised myself long ago that I wouldn't run from a fight. But I knew that in this case, there was no winning. She would go mad and kill me if the cavalry didn't. I began to walk away, and then broke into a run, putting that beast in the shelters behind me. I heard an unearthly howl behind me, and her words echoed in my mind. Her war cry sent chills down my spine, and I knew that the ground would be dyed red by morning. Despite knowing this, something stopped me from going far from where she had halted. I found a small patch of trees and took shelter there. Not knowing why, I didn't simply keep running until she was far, far behind me. The screams of beast and man echoed behind me as I sat, leaning against the sturdy tree. I held my long coat in my hands, longing for its warmth, but not putting it on. I didn't want anything that had touched her skin touching mine. Still, emotion stabbed at me when I saw droplets of her blood beaded in the fabric. Why was she doing this? How was I worth saving? Minutes dragged and seemed like days as the battle raged behind me. As hard as I tried to block out the sounds, I could hear the screams of the horses and the snarl of the girl, her shrieks of pain. I laughed to myself, thinking of my former life. Never then would I have expected myself to have fallen so far that I would abandon a girl to fight for her life, even if she were more monster than human. I wasn't that person anymore, however, and this Dante could do just that. Finally, there was silence behind me. I almost expected to hear the hooves of the remaining cavalry approach, but there was only the sound of rain which had begun to fall in glistening droplets. Knowing that the fight had ended, I rose to my feet. I had no intention of turning back to see who had won. If she died, the world would be better off without a monster like her, and if she lived, then I definitely wouldn't be bothered by her again. Just as those thoughts ran through my head, I heard a muffled thud behind me, and instinctively I turned. Only a few dozen feet away lay that beast, collapsed on her side and still in her wolf-like form. Unable to help myself, I approached her, one hand on my dagger. The ground beneath her was soaked in her blood, which mingled with the falling rain. Her eyes were closed and her mouth open, her bloody tongue hanging from her potted jaws, ivory teeth glittering in the darkness. Scores of wounds marked her body, and I was truly surprised when the ragged heaving of her sides alerted me that she was still alive. I knew what I needed to do, and I pressed my dagger to her throat. Even in the darkness, I could see the red mark that decorated her neck, made even more brilliant by the blood that dyed her pelt. I pressed the dagger into her skin. May Rakont bless your eternal sleep and carry you safely to the next world, I whispered instinctively, remembering days of old. At my words, her green eyes flicked open and locked with mine, yet there was no malice in them, only acceptance, even a twinge of happiness. I flinched back, and images flashed through my mind, and I buried my face in my hands. It was at that moment I realized it for sure. I should have known all along, just like I should have known that the King of Arak was tricking me as well as her own daughter. Yet my mind had a way of deceiving itself. But now I knew the truth, and I sheathed my dagger. I would never be able to kill her. No matter how many she slaughtered, no matter what she did, she was invincible, because it was never her eyes that I saw. As long as those memories from long ago remained, I wouldn't be able to kill her with my own hands. I had tried, yes, but if I'd truly wanted her dead, I could easily have slit her throat as she slept. It wouldn't have been beneath me. That was not why I hadn't killed her. As long as I looked at her and saw that other person, she was safe from me. I rose to my feet, and she closed her eyes. The memories returned to where they had lain, undisturbed for years, until I had met this creature that insisted on drawing them to the surface. I glanced at her one last time, seeing the grievous wounds that marred her flesh, seeing her body struggle to heal such a magnitude of injuries. As I looked at her, I saw her shape begin to change, and I had strapped my long coat over her before she returned to her human form. "Farewell," I whispered, turning away from the wounded creature. I began to walk away. Whether she lived or died, that was up to her and the gods. It wouldn't matter to me. I intended on putting her and those memories far behind me. I saw carnage from her fight everywhere I looked. Weapons were strewn across the land. The corpses of cavalry soldiers dotted everything. The rain washed away the blood from the ravaged ground, and I knew that in the same way it would rinse the blood from my hands and from her skin. But it would never get rid of the taste or the scent. Those would linger with her for the rest of her life, if the gods decided to keep her alive, that is. I walked off into the night, not certain of my destination, but feeling more at ease than I had in years. Chapter 20. Alone. When I became conscious again, the first thing that I noticed was it was daytime. The sun beat at my eyelids as I stirred weakly, then noticed the second thing. Pain. Blinding pain, stinging at my body. I sat up, placing my hands on where the pain was coming from. An arrow was lodged in my shoulder, and another in my back. Wincing, I pulled out the sharp arrows and gritted my teeth. Blood began to flow from the wounds, but I knew they weren't very serious, only painful. My other wounds seemed to have healed, although some of the pain still burned under my skin. After I'd cataloged my injuries, I tried to figure out where exactly I was. The last thing I could remember was trying so hard to protect Dante, and hoofbeats and howling. It was dark then, and now the sun was up. The ground was damp, so I assumed that it had rained. I absentmindedly pulled up on the fabric covering me. Then I realized it was Dante's coat. I blinked in surprise and looked around. He was nowhere to be seen, and his scent was long gone. I stood up slowly, a small smile on my face as I tugged at the coat around me. At least he was safe then. I thanked him in my mind. Even though he had led me to my death. It was obvious that he had known the whole time. I tried to fool myself into believing he was truly trying to get me cured and have this broken mark removed. But still, it didn't make sense. What would a random mercenary or assassin want me dead for? True, Dante had hated me, but he hadn't even known me until he was assigned to escort me. Someone must have ordered him to have me killed. That would make sense, but who would do that? I had been told that it was my father who had given him this job, but surely my father wouldn't send me off to another country for the sole sake of getting me killed. He would have killed me himself many times. But then Kaz might have found out. My thoughts grew even more dark, and finally I just shook my head, my red hair settling over my shoulders. No. It wouldn't make sense for Father to do something like that. Even he wouldn't kill his own daughter. Perhaps some other kingdom? Maybe Taliot, or Kokaba. Maybe they had learned about me and wanted my death? Yes, that was sure to be it. I scanned the landscape around me, and for the first time, I saw the corpses. I felt sick to my stomach as I realized that it had been I who had killed them. But quickly I bit back all the feelings of regret that seized me. I had decided that I would fight, and I had feelings that if I changed my mind, that voice in my head would force me to change again, even against my will. No, I did not need regret. It would only drag me down. I turned to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. Sighing, I dropped Dante's coat to the ground, taking my four-legged form. I dug a deep hole into the sandy ground, then rolled the bodies into it. I parted my jaws to say Varrock's farewell to the dead, but a different god's name popped into my head, though I couldn't place it. I saw Dante's eyes, cold like steel, flash through my mind, but I wasn't sure why. May Varrock smile upon you, and may his light mark your path. With his light your sword will not falter, nor your shield ever fail, I said, falling back into the warrior's farewell. The passage was not the correct one, but it was the best that I could remember. I buried their mangled bodies, feeling guilt trying to drag me into the pit with them. Finally, the job was done. Though I couldn't spare their lives without dying myself or allowing Dante to be killed, at least I would give them a fitting burial. I took my human form again, then saw my pack lying on the ground. I found a fresh set of clothes and dressed, pulling Dante's long coat on after. I stood up, looking around me, but still not moving. Where would I go? Before I had a destination. Now, I had none, and I had lost my guide as well. It would have been easy enough to scout the surrounding area and find his scent, but I knew that Dante would rather be rid of me. I would have to find my way around this new world myself. It seemed so large compared to the tiny cell that I had been dwelling in for so many years. Would Kokaba come after me? I wondered to myself, as I dug the toe of my new boots into the ground. They had clearly been promised some reward, or else they would have no reason to kill me. But was that reward great enough to justify the loss of more of their troops? And did they link any human form to that of the beast? If they did, it would be much harder for me to go undetected if they were searching for both of my forms. I knew that I had to get away from here, and also knew that there was only one person who would help me now. I needed to find Kaz. He was the one that would never turn his back on me. He was either in Viraki or Cinnaba, where the princess he was courting lived. Now, the struggle would be finding my way there. I picked up my packs, slinging them over my shoulder. Then I picked a direction and started walking, pain throbbing through my shoulder and back. Yet I kept moving. If I stopped, I wasn't sure I would find the willpower to start again. Kaz would help me. He always promised to help me. I had hoped that, wherever he was, he would remember that promise from years ago.